Hello, sorry about that. Okay, you can hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about two projects that we've done over the last 18 months for Citizens Advice Scotland. Um, Hopefully that might, I don't know, might provide some interest. So the first project we did was helping with the Scottish Citizens Advice Helpline. So they came to us with a particular problem. So this is a national helpline directing calls to 59 local bureaus, and they'd implemented this in the middle of lockdown as they needed a way to get people to interact with citizens' advice when they weren't coming into the bureaus. And they had a workflow that was a little bit like this. So a caller would call in and they'd get directed to a national helpline. The national helpline would take a few details of the call, put details of that caller's problems onto a CRM system. Someone in the local bureau would then check the CRM the next morning, phone the person back, and they might be a bit annoyed that it's taken 24 hours. They might be engaged. They might have kind of slightly moved on from where they were. So there were three problems with this. It was taking 24 hours. No one really wanted to work on the national helpline. The volunteers wanted to be advisors helping local people, not people in a call centre. And thirdly, there was a sort of spaghetti of systems at the local bureaus that meant that calls were getting misplaced, and it was just generally a bad experience. We were able to use AI to put in place a system that changed this to being 30 seconds to get through to a local bureau. And so it was just better from all regards. I'll show you just very quickly how it worked.
Hi there. Thanks for calling Scotland Citizens Advice Helpline. So we can get you connected to the right team for your local area. What's the first half of your postcode?
EH4.
Was the first half of your postcode EH4?
Aye, it was.
Okay, I'll put you through to Citizens Advice Edinburgh. One moment, please.
So the results of this were like, it's really worked on so many different levels. It's saved Citizens Advice Scotland about £400,000 per year. It's improved the service delivery, so you're getting through in minutes, not days. It's redeployed staff and volunteers to the front line to actually giving advice, which is the key thing the service is supposed to do. And it's won a batch of awards. It's like there's a very simple bit of AI, or that the functionality of the AI is really quite simple there. It's just taking that 3 digits of the first half of someone's postcode and finding which bureau they're attached to. But when we started, I mean, this was 2 years ago, and that was seen as being right on the cutting edge of what's possible with AI. A lot of people told us it was impossible due to the Scottish accent is famously hard and famously diverse, one of the toughest ones for AI. So that was something that really seems to have worked. Now moving on to this second project that we've taken on. So Extra Help Unit is one part of Citizens Advice Scotland. It's about 50 advisors working from a virtual contact centre helping. It's a second line energy advice service. So if you're having problems with your bill and it's too complicated for Citizens Advice to help you, it's too complex for your utility firm to provide you, you get directed to the Extra Help Unit. And their problem was, they know due to the cost of living crisis over the last couple of years, every winter there's going to be a queue. Everyone in that queue is going to be vulnerable, but how can they prioritize the most vulnerable out of those vulnerable people? Just give you a little sense of the scenario of what's happening. So here's a guy called Dan. Dan is a chef. He lost his job a month ago, and he's got 2 kids, one of whom relies on insulin, which needs to be kept in the fridge. He's got his bills in a tangle, and so he's in danger of disconnection. This is a typical person that EHU might be dealing with. But they're not just, a caseworker's not just dealing with Dan, they're also looking after Fatima, who's a pensioner with COPD. They're looking after Susie, who's got a newborn and can't afford to turn the radiator on. In fact, they're not just looking after Susie, Dan, and Fatima. the average caseworker can have 50 to 70 cases on their books at any one time. And these caseworkers are super diligent and really care about the people they're looking after. But that's just an awful lot of mental overload to remember the details for all these people. And if you're a caseworker, you don't get nice pictograms. In fact, you get something a bit more like this. You log into a CRM system. One caseworker described it as name soup. It's just like you come back from lunch and there's this wall of cases. You log in the morning, there's a wall of cases and you don't know where to start. So what we think we can do, there's two things we want to do to help here. First is create a prioritization ranking. So we've done a lot of workshops with the most experienced caseworkers to try and understand what they're looking for. And then that's helped us to identify the types of risks we're looking at. And then we are training the Help First algorithm on the labels on the way that the best caseworkers label their cases. And so we can find out who are the people who need to go right to the front of the queue and who are the people who can afford to wait 24 hours or even longer. The second one, and this is what the caseworkers seem most excited about, is what we're calling the risk alerts. So this is Dan's case. He's a top priority case because he's got that combination of vulnerabilities and being immediate risk of disconnection. We brought in these different infographics. So you can see he had an equipment issue. He needs electricity because he's absolutely reliant on electricity for the fridge and family and health. And you can roll over these and see, okay, the equipment risk is about needing the refrigerator for his son's insulin. When you're switching between 50 or 60 cases, just having these little aid memoirs reduces the cognitive burden. And given Citizens Advice Scotland are really aware that burnout is a kind of continual problem with caseworkers, anything we can do to make the job less overwhelming and less mentally burdensome seems like a good thing. Oh, and there's a third thing we're doing as well. And this is from a manager's point of view. Once the case is no longer a black box, you can be like, oh, okay, you can see Jacob in this instance has got a high proportion of high priority cases. So even though he's got less cases and it would be tempting to hand some new cases to him, maybe someone like Claire's a better person to give new cases to because she hasn't got the high priority cases. So what have we learned from doing these two AI projects over the last couple of years? Firstly, I think sometimes AI is kind of presented as something that's kind of quite separate and new, whereas I think when it's being implemented, it's really the same as any digital project in that the service design comes first. It's like, it's not technology for technology's sake. It's trying to understand the user's need, where the gaps are, and really getting under the skin of what the proper problem is. So three things I'm thinking of when I'm thinking of service design first. Really getting a crisp idea of what the problem is. I've seen we did a third AI project that didn't work quite so well. And I think if I look back on that, I think we had a vague idea that something in this area would be good and it might be good for the business, but we didn't really understand the problem specifically from the user point of view. And nothing beats spending time with users, interviewing them, shadowing them. Secondly, I think brainstorming solutions, just because your AI can be 1,000,001 different things, particularly with that first project, the National Helpline. We spent the first 3 weeks coming up with different ideas for the client. We had an idea around geographic detection of handsets. We had an idea around a menu system of like how we'd break the region, break Scotland down into something that worked on an IVR menu. We're approaching it from all different angles, and the shape of the solution. AI is a tool there. It's not the kind of the solution in itself. And thirdly, I'll always work so hard to try and find some way that you can prototype something and get something in front of people so that you get such a different idea of whether you're on the right track with the solution if you actually mock something up and get people to click on it or interact with it. And again, in that case of the helpline, we were able to find something that did 90% of the job and we could set it up in a couple of days. And then you started getting users to use it, being like, would this work? And that's so informative. So in terms of, I just thought that maybe it's hard to know how you can brainstorm solutions when you don't know what the space is or what the terrain of possibilities is. And I think anyone who's been to all the sessions today will begin to understand there's kind of a few AI structures that come back time and time again, things like compressing text, rewriting it, understanding voice, understanding sentiment, looking for anomalies in data sets. Chatbots, I'm not sure, maybe I shouldn't have put that on there. I think chatbots is a bit different and also quite a slightly more problematic area for AI. Here's a few sources that I find super useful. My friend's done this thing called 100 Days of AI, which is a small 20-minute AI tutorial every day of using something like Canva or ChatGPT. It's a bit more geeky, but there's a podcast I like called Twiml, and there's a few other places you can just look for, like G2 or Tools for Good allows you to look at lots of different patterns of what people have done and think, can you apply it to yourself? No code. So this is my particular kind of area of enthusiasm, is rather than building stuff with software from scratch, if you can find a piece of software that already exists and is customizable, and there's this whole burgeoning area of what's called no code. So it's basically kind of like Lego bricks of different pieces of software. Even like if it allows you to get to a 90% solution in 10% of the time, then that allows you to iterate and understand so much more quickly. So that's really what we try and work towards, is this creating a long list of no-code tools, rating them roughly, creating a prototype of our few favorite ones, getting them in front of the users and seeing, is that working? And then going all the way back to the start and iterating through that process. I think, again, this is like, how do you get service design that's informed by users who understand the crux of what you're proposing? So the general point is, with software, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If someone's done it once, it's almost freely available for you second time around. And my final 2 points would be, it's kind of interesting for me how it's changed the world of software into 2 areas that I think are becoming of increasing importance. Partly, one is data governance. Like, it's very hard to do any AI or machine learning project without getting quite deep into data governance and thinking about the ethics and the GDPR and the doing data protection impact assessments. And fourthly, another area that's kind of, for compared to traditional software, is there's a lot more work to be done in evaluating a lot of these systems, because they can work for 90% of situations, and then understanding around the edges where they fail, it's much more kind of organic, and it's less cut and dried, like compared to normal software. Thank you for listening, and that's us.